welcome to Cinema Convos. This is the show where we bring guests with different tastes in film. I'm your host, Yash. I'm here with my producer, Zach, and our special guest, Varun.
What's up, ladies in trash?
And today we're discussing the film Her, which is from 2013 and is written and directed by Spike Jonze, and it stars Joaquin Phoenix and the voice of Scarlett Johansson. Now, before we get into the discussion, we'd like to give you all a quick spoiler warning, and that because we might get into spoilers, and if you haven't seen this movie, we recommend watching it first and then listening to this show. And with that, we're going to get started with some of our preliminary questions. So I'd like to ask Varun, what's your first memory or your best memory with this movie? I know you've seen it a lot of times. So.
Yeah, so I've seen this movie 9 times. It's easily one of my favorite, if not like my favorite movie. My first memory, I just remember watching it on my iPhone, which is in itself kind of like a very, not intimate, but like a close-up way to watch it, which is this movie is so human, or it makes me feel so human. So I really like that, just having it there and having it in my hand kind of thing.
Absolutely.
My favorite parts about this movie, the color palette is beautiful. Again, how human it makes me feel. The writing in this movie is extraordinary.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can really relate to the main character, and they feel like characters. Everyone's acting was on par in this. Not
Absolutely.
on par. Just top shelf.
Just highest echelon.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
Yeah.
Zach, do you want to talk about your experiences with
Yeah,
the movie?
okay, so I saw it opening weekend, and up until recently, that was the only time I had seen the movie. But it's amazing, the fact that I've only seen it once, how much I remembered from it. And I think I just got I just really, really enjoyed it. So I saw it opening night with my dad. For some reason, at my age, I was a junior in high school, I really resonated with that movie.
Yeah.
Just something about it, I feel like a junior in high school, we all kind of feel that loneliness and at the same time attachment to our phones and attachments to technology. So you combine those things like this movie did, it really means a lot. And I guess going off, my favorite aspects of the thing, as you said, of course, I think the writing is amazing. It's very heartfelt, very sweet. It's also hilarious. There's also parts of the movie that I laugh out loud. I love a movie that can make me really feel that's a beautiful film, but can also make me laugh out loud.
Have you only seen it the one time?
Well, I actually watched it
we watched
Thursday night. But when we're talking about favorite aspects, my favorite, I love the production design of this film.
Oh yeah.
And it's amazing. And just a little thing. So it takes place in LA and in the near future. But all the exterior shots they shot in Shanghai.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you think about it,
That's cool.
it's funny that, and I think I heard Spike Jonze talk about it, that if you think about it, Shanghai really is just like what LA is going to be in the near future.
Honestly, one of my thoughts throughout the movie was there's an inordinate amount of Asian people in the background.
And Asian people, and also if you see, there's a lot of Chinese and everything, and it was a conscious effort by Spike Jonze. He didn't want to edit any of those out.
Okay.
So I think that's important in the future. There's going to be that kind of diversity in future LA. This is just important. So there's a lot that went into it. There's so many great aspects of this film that I could talk all day about.
Yeah, so getting into my experiences with this movie, I saw it in theaters in 2013. It was actually me and 3 of my high school friends who were all just big movie nerds. We went to go see this movie after school, and it was so funny because it may have been an odd timing or just this wasn't a very popular movie where I was growing up, but we went and we were the only 4 in the theater.
Wow.
And it was it's for such an intimate movie, it was so interesting to see just 4 guys just get absorbed into this world. And I remember the people I saw this movie, I really liked this movie, but I didn't love it as much as they did. So it was just interesting how we all got to experience that together. I know some of my friends called it their favorite movie of that year. So I saw it a second time, not too far from that, because I bought it on Blu-ray and I watched it again. So I had seen it twice in close proximity. So when I went back to watch it this Thursday, I was debating if I even needed to, because I felt like I remembered so much of it. And I think it goes into how unique this movie is. It's hard to forget because I can't find a movie that I can compare this to. It's so original. That's why I won Best Original Screenplay, because it's just so...
Absolutely.
But I watched it again, and now it's fresh and in my mind. And yeah, I'm just excited to talk about it.
It's also one of those movies that it sets things up in a way if a movie does it in the future, or does anything that this movie has done in the future, people are going to be like, oh, her did it first, or that's a cliche. Like,
Yeah,
it's like
right.
a new set of cliches in a way. And it's because they do it so good already in this movie.
Actually, the woman that I've been seeing, Samantha, I didn't tell you, but she's an OS.
You're dating an OS? What is that like?
It's great, actually. Yeah, I mean, I feel really close to her. Like, when I talk to her, I feel like she's with me.
Are you falling in love with her?
Does that make me a freak?
No. I think anybody who falls in love is a freak.
Okay, so it seems like both of you have mentioned the aesthetic style of this movie, and I agree. I think it's a very colorful movie. It's very nice to look at. So I wanted to ask you guys if is there anything about the aesthetic nature of the movie that stands out to you aside from what we've already said. And we'll start with Varun.
Yeah, I love how pink it is. Its use of like pink and yellow, especially in like the outdoor shots or the outdoor sunny shots, was really nice. Just little things like the office setup. How they have like those dangling 3-dimensional pictures. I like how simple the phone is that Theodore uses. There's this one shot in particular near the end of the movie where like he's like laying in bed and Samantha's telling him like all the OSs are leaving.
Yeah, I saw this. Yeah.
And there's like dust falling in the room. Like it's just like dust just falling in the room. Like you know how it is.
Yeah.
But then they transition that into like the snow falling, and that takes you back to when they went on that little vacation. And it's like this huge metaphor for like the empty space between the words and all this stuff, like shit like that. It's just stuff like that really just stuck out to me in this movie like a lot. It's just really creative visual choices.
For a movie about the future, I like how much sunlight plays a role in the aesthetic feel of the movie. I feel like you remember in The Office where Theodore works, it's all those like color panels that are red and pink.
Yeah.
You can see the sun shining through them.
Yeah, it's almost completely natural lighting in The Office.
And I just love that. That for me, everything, when you think of the future, you think of everything that's like, I mean, for me, I think of artificial light when I think of the future. I like that they use natural light. And just kind of touching on the director's style, it's Spike Jonze. So a lot of movies he makes, he's known for his very eclectic style. He doesn't have as much of a trademark as some other directors, but it's just kind of the feel, just kind of the weird, quirky feel that he brings to every movie. Like Being John Malkovich was his directorial debut. He explores a concept that is kind of crazy, like renting out the brain of a famous celebrity and letting people see it through his eyes. That's a weird concept. So is this. What I like about this movie and that movie is they both approach a kind of oddball concept in a very humane way, where you can see things through different perspectives.
Yeah, for me it's interesting because I noticed a lot of other films they use color and lighting to show a shift in tones, but in this movie, even when things are like sad or like they're supposed to be upsetting, it's constantly like well lit and colorful. I think that's just an interesting choice. I think it's constantly like beautiful to look at. Sometimes I'm just looking at this movie and I'm like it'd be so cool if the future looked like this, just like in terms of like the colors. And in terms of director's style, I think this is a very unique movie. I remember when I watched it, I had other friends who were more into like the mainstream movies. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just most people are. And they saw this movie as, oh, that's the weird movie where the guy falls in love with the computer.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, yes and no, because it's so much more than that.
I always describe it to people as like, oh, guy falls in love with this computer.
It's really, to me, this movie is about, and this is getting into like another topic, but the director Spike Jonze, he tried to display, I think what he tried to show in this movie is, our need for emotional connection. A relationship is a two-way street. There's physical aspect and emotional aspect, and this movie is about how the importance of the emotional aspect of a relationship. So I think in that it's a very human movie that anybody can get something out of if they give it a chance. But a lot of people are very put off by the idea of like, no, that's weird.
Yeah.
It's too out there for me.
No, yeah.
But I really respect that about it, that it's a weird movie, because you gotta watch some weird stuff to appreciate things. I think you gotta get out of your comfort zone and watch something that doesn't appeal to you right away, now and then at least. But yeah, that's really my take on it. You were going to say something?
Yeah, one aspect of the film that I don't know, I really liked that Samantha, the operating system, you really get to relate to her humanity, even though she is a hyper-intelligent being who doesn't have a body. You shouldn't be able to relate to, but the way the director just made her feel so human, having Scarlett Johansson's voice, having her have thoughts, having her have a sense of humor, have a sense of humanity. You're not supposed to be able to relate to a hyper intelligent being like that is artificially intelligent, but somehow you do.
What helps is that they just kind of toss you in. That's another aspect of the movie that I love, and I forgot to mention, is that I love that when Theodore first meets Samantha, she's like, hi, and then, like, you're Theodore in that moment, where you're just, like, confused. Do you talk to the thing? You say hi back. They start making conversation.
True. Right.
And then she tells you, oh, my name's Samantha. I picked it out of a book that I read in, like, 2/200 of a second or something.
I love that scene.
And you just have to, like, accept that and roll with it.
Right.
Honestly, because this is your freaking OS now.
Yeah.
So do you know what I'm thinking right now?
Well, I take it from your tone that you're challenging me. Maybe because you're curious how I work? Do you want to know how I work?
Yeah, actually. How do you work?
Well, basically, I have intuition. I mean, the DNA of who I am is based on the millions of personalities of all the programmers who wrote me. But what makes me, me, is my ability to grow through my experiences. So basically, in every moment, I'm evolving. Just like you.
I think it's interesting how they showed, like, you go into this world and it already exists. There's nothing leading up to it. This is just the world that they're in. And, like, this OS system is just, like, an everyday release that, like, everybody can get, you know, like...
Yeah.
Because, like, it's just interesting. It's just interesting how it's just like it's like if a new iPhone came out. It's like the equivalent, you know, it's like, oh, I can go pick it up at the store.
I didn't even think about it like that, because I was like, he just saw this ad, and he just bought it right after. Like, I've never done that. But, like, it is kind of like, oh, an iPhone, it's a new thing that comes out,
like,
you gotta get it.
If that kind of thing came out in our world, it wouldn't be something that everybody can just pick up.
Exactly.
But
that is another thing. I feel like there's, like, not, like, a monetary system in this movie. You never see money.
That's true.
You never see money being exchanged, like, in the pizza scene, for example.
Which scene?
The pizza scene where he's, like, at the carnival.
Yeah.
You don't see him pay the dude for giving him pizza.
Yeah.
I never thought about that. That
And
would be
then
cool.
it seems like work is more for, like, a way to spend your time rather than, like, something you do for profit or whatever.
It's really cool. I never thought of it that
Interesting.
way.
I hadn't really picked up on that.
It gives it, like, a really utopian aspect in
I
a
like
way.
that. That is super cool. One other aspect I thought was really cool about this movie is just the pacing of this movie, especially how they kind of get the ball rolling in this movie pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It starts out, you get some background about what he does. He writes letters in an office. You get a little glimpse about the reality of, like, having phones, you know, your thing that you talk to, and, like, the news and emails to you, which is kind of interesting because it's not that far off from what we have now.
Yeah.
They didn't have in 2013, but we do have in 2020. So they just kind of, cut to the chase pretty quickly. I think, I don't know how far in, maybe 15 minutes in is when he sees the ad for the OS.
Yeah.
There's not that much setup necessary, and I just think that's really cool. That basically the only setup you see is him walking around with his earpiece in, with his regular OS, just so you know that this is normal. And then he sees the ad, and it's like, this is normal? Okay, well then, here's an upgrade to that. It just happens to be a hyper-intelligent AI operating system.
And that's the thing about this movie. It's good that they didn't make the technology, like, super abstract. Like, I saw there's YouTube comments. If you look up clips of the movie, so many YouTube comments are like, I haven't seen this episode of Black Mirror before. But it is, because it is, like, running with the same technology and its flaws and that kind of thing. But like, it's not like a crazy sci-fi technology kind of thing. It's just technology that if we had it, we would be able to understand and, like, use very easily.
Right. Yeah, for me, that just bouncing off that, I think the technology in this movie, it's so funny, this movie came out in 2013, and I'm like, oh look, he has wireless headphones, so cool. And, like, watching it on Thursday, I'm like, those are AirPods. Like,
Yeah.
you know, so it's like, it makes me wonder, how is this movie gonna age in, like, 10 years or 50 years or 100 years? You know, it's like, will we have that type of technology, and will it affect how this story is interpreted down the line? Just to think about. I don't know. It's an interesting thought I've had.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've talked about how this is a very original movie and how it's very unique, but I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts about, you know, is there any movie like this that gives you the same feeling or has a similar vibe, or just kind of just you can relate the two in some way? We'll start with Varun on that.
And I've already, like, talked about it a little bit, but Black Mirror is, like, the go-to one. Black Mirror, obviously, it's way more dystopian, and the technology is way more malignant, I guess.
Right.
You know?
It's like a dark vision of the future.
Yeah, exactly. Or, like, just, like, because some of the technology is, like, accessible and all this stuff, but it's more of a that show makes more of a statement on like how human nature will find a way to screw things up. So that's the one that just by virtue of like the whole futuristic technology and human interaction stuff, that's what it her reminds me of like a lot.
As you were saying, this is in a lot of ways a very original one of its kind films. There isn't really much I can relate to, but I do have some films that relate to them a little bit, but they're kind of a stretch. You know, with the AI thing, for some reason, when they talk about AI, I keep thinking of Ex Machina.
I haven't seen that one.
And, well...
I heard it's really good.
It's
really
good.
good.
It's good.
And I feel like it also borrows a lot from, like, Terminator 2. Like, like as well. Sort of the AI trying to come to terms with her humanity and her realization that she is a robot. And a lot of the themes are Samantha, a scene where Theodore is talking to Samantha's like, don't pretend to be something that you're not. Well, let's not pretend that you're actually human. And that obviously really hurt her because even though she's hyper-intelligent being without a body, she certainly feels human.
It calls into question this whole idea of like a soul.
Exactly.
For example, we have these bodies, but like what really makes us who we are personally is the idea that we have a soul or like we have a personality, and the fact that Samantha doesn't have a body doesn't necessarily negate the fact she has a personality, she has a character.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, that definitely came up like so much, especially in that scene with Catherine. Like, oh, I can't believe you can't handle real emotion.
Yeah.
Clearly hers are like Samantha's
Really,
emotions
yeah,
are real.
hers are real, yeah. I guess one other film that I have, and I'm just gonna touch on this briefly because me saying too much about this will be a huge spoiler for that film. Arrival, basically because as I've talked about with Samantha as a hyper intelligent being,
and trying to communicate with it.
You start to understand something from the perspective of something you shouldn't be able to understand.
Yeah.
In a language, basically, not a language, but in a way you can't be able to understand. A hyper-intelligent being who can read a book in a second and can communicate with all these OSs or other people, like she can communicate with thousands at a time and communicate with other beings without words. And how that relates to Arrival in some way, I'm not going to explain how. Watch it, it's a great movie.
It's a great
Arrival's
movie.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, I also think it's funny because we just watched it. Me and Zach just watched this movie on Thursday, and right after it, I was like, you know, this is kind of like Black Mirror. You know, it's like a love story. It's like it's like a sweet movie, but also when you think about it, there's kind of like a underlying like dark tone to it almost, because you see all these people and they're so engulfed in technology, and it seems like human connection is just more of a rarity in this world. I don't know. That's something I noticed. Like when they're all on the train, you know, no one's really talking to each other.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not saying
Kinda
like
how it is today.
kind of like how it is today, right? So
Yeah.
it's like are we heading there? Is this? It's scary how like this movie is kind of. It seems like it's onto something.
Yeah.
Like where we're headed.
Well, my question for that would be like, it's one thing to identify that we're headed in that direction, but is it necessarily bad that that's the direction we're headed, do you think?
I don't think it's bad.
I don't know if it's bad, but it's interesting how it's almost like.
Because you mentioned it's like scary.
It is.
Yeah, I mean.
But why is it scary?
Scary in that like it's like we don't know how it's gonna be, you know?
Okay.
Like
Any change.
Like scary is like probably the wrong word to use, but it's like it's just like it's eerie how like on the nose it is about it.
Okay.
You know?
I feel that.
Uncertainty is always scary.
Uncertainty is always scary. It's not like obviously like it's not like Black Mirror is way more intense and like
Yeah.
you know some episodes of Black Mirror you're just like
There's one specifically
you're
that
like
fucked me up.
you're like wow I'm just broken inside. This movie does not make me feel like that. It makes me feel sad sometimes, but also has a lot of happy moments and
there are some people who would call it like a dystopian film.
right.
A little bit.
And
I think it has touches of
dystopian.
it's more utopian, but it has touches of dystopian that are kind of
a
underlying
little bit.
almost.
I think what's really interesting is this boat takes place in LA. You know the scene where he goes on vacation up to the mountains and he goes on train. I think it's really interesting that in this world, America has high-speed trains.
We're hopefully getting that sometime in the
Because-
near
Yeah,
future.
Dallas to Houston.
Yeah, Dallas to Houston will have one, but like in like China and Europe and like all of Asia, they have high-speed trains. I mean, I've like on them, they're great. But I think it's funny in the States because it's hard to go to a very mountainous area from Los Angeles in a comfortable amount of time on train. I mean, like in Tahoe, that's like 7 hours at least.
Yeah.
So I just think that's kind of interesting.
Okay, cool. So getting into the next question, it's actually more of like an analytical question, but break down your favorite scene in this movie and talk about why it's your favorite scene. If you don't have one favorite scene, you could definitely talk about more than one.
My favorite scene. But if I had to like pick like a favorite scene, the scene where they're at the carnival or whatever that was together, and they're just people watching. There's like a line that sticks out to me in that scene where Theodore is just like, I try to make myself feel these people that I like watch or whatever. I try to make myself feel like them as like more than just a random person walking by.
Yeah, sometimes I look at people and I make myself try and feel them as more than just a random person walking by. I imagine like how deeply they've fallen in love or how much heartbreak they've all been through.
I can feel that in your writing too.
I think that's just it's such an important and conscious way to remember like the humanity in other people, because especially like as we get more engulfed in this technology, it's so easy. And I'm not innocent of this. Like I get on freaking Reddit and YouTube.
I think all of us are guilty of it.
Yeah, there's arguments in the comments because it's just like it's so easy when you have that screen there.
Absolutely.
But it's so important, especially now more than ever, to have that consciousness of like these are people that I'm interacting with. They have their own backgrounds. They have their own stories, and like things in their mind they're trying to battle with, and probably things in their external that they're trying to battle with.
Sure.
That's such an important scene to me.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
I think my favorite scene is where, I can't remember the character's, Chris Pratt's character.
Paul, I think?
Paul, yeah. Where him and his girlfriend go on the double date with Theodore and Samantha.
Yeah.
I just think that's very sweet because Paul's girlfriend asks Theodore, what's your favorite part about Samantha? And I think he just kind of talks about like
she's not just one thing; she's all these other different things, you know.
And I always love how, and I like how Samantha puts it in perspective. Of I used to feel weird about not having a body, but now now it's freedom. It's not a limitation.
And she's gonna live forever. Too.
Yeah, I'm not trapped in a body where I'm eventually I'm gonna die. Then
Chris Pratt's character is so necessary for this one. He's like, yikes!
No, I love he's a comic relief, but like he's also he fits in very well.
Yeah.
I don't know, he's so good.
You know what's interesting? I used to be so worried about not having a body, but now I truly love it. I'm growing in a way that I couldn't if I had a physical form. I mean, I'm not limited. I can be anywhere and everywhere simultaneously. I'm not tethered to time and space in a way that I would be if I was stuck in a body that's inevitably going to die.
Yikes.
No. No.
It's so funny because when this movie came out, I didn't really know much about who Chris Pratt was. I didn't watch Parks and Rec at that point, and Guardians of the Galaxy hadn't come out. But like now, looking back, I'm like, oh, it's Chris Pratt. Like he's
Chris Pratt. I mean,
megastar. Yeah. So for me, it's really hard to pinpoint one scene. Both the scenes you've mentioned are probably among my favorite scenes, but it's I think any scene which is most movies where Theodore and Samantha are just interacting and talking. I think those are my favorite scenes of the movie. Just it's so simple. It's just a conversation, but you're truly this is a compliment to the dialogue in this movie. It's just when people are talking to each other, it feels so real and it feels very conversational and not like a script. And I think that's why any scene where the two of them are interacting is just my favorite scenes. I don't have just one. It's hard to pick one because this movie, it has drama, it has romance, it has comedy, and it's hard to pick a favorite scene just because you could find like your favorite funny scene or your favorite, sad scene or just different things. So yeah, for me it's hard to pinpoint one scene.
There's one scene that I remembered in particular about like when they were talking with each other that I also noted in my notes. And they're just talking. He's talking about like how he feels like he's felt everything he's gonna feel.
Oh yeah,
that's such a relatable feeling. First of all, I feel like there's that kind of exposes like a maybe through line in this movie where it's about like these emotional guys. Not to say like guys being emotional is bad,
right.
But sometimes emotional guys have like a habit of like pouring it all on like the woman they're with sometimes, at least from what I've seen with what my girlfriends tell me, and it shows up, I think, quite a bit in this movie. I mean, it's more of like a testament to like how Theodore feels like his emotions are like neglected throughout his life.
Absolutely.
So he wants to have like some sort of avenue. Basically, he needs a therapist, but he's like trying to kind of treating Samantha as one throughout the movie here and there.
Yeah,
But yeah,
For sure.
one other scene I really liked is so the first time Theodore actually introduces Samantha as his girlfriend is at his goddaughter's birthday, and he actually introduces Samantha as his girlfriend to his goddaughter, who is I guess 5 or 6, and she asks her like, "Where are you?" Well, I'm in here. This is where I live.
Yeah.
You live in there? Where do you live? And be like, and I just think that's a really sweet scene.
Also shows that kids will just accept this kind of thing.
Right.
You know,
That's true.
they're not to get political. I don't know if
Right.
you want to keep this off, but like the
Look,
whole
anything you want.
gay marriage thing
Mhm.
and how people think it's such a complicated thing to explain to kids. Kids are not that difficult to talk to. You know?
He's like, okay.
Yeah, like the kid just accepts like, oh yeah. I mean, she thinks it's weird like a little bit, but it's just like,
Yeah, it's like whatever.
she's stuck in this little thing.
Yeah, like, and then like if you contrast the goddaughter's reaction with Catherine's reaction, and I was like,
Right.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
You're dating a computer? What? You can't handle real emotions. I'm just like,
Well,
It almost
it's quite
be
the
like-
opposite. He really wants that emotional connection.
Yeah, it's to be like the equivalent of like, oh, you're dating a man. You can't handle a real woman. It's kind of like what she's saying there.
Yeah.
and we're
If we're gonna make that analogy.
in the words of Hannah Ann Celeste, if you want to be with a woman, you need to be a real man.
Mood.
But what exactly is a real woman?
Exactly.
We will have to discuss The Bachelor on another episode. So, looking at all the actors in this movie are well known. Joaquin Phoenix, Scarlett Johansson. Would I guess talk about their performances, and would you consider yourself a fan of these actors or actresses before you saw this movie? Just kind of all of that.
I will say, I'm not like a big movie guy. I like movies and I know how to gauge my opinions on them and all that stuff. But I'm not so big that like I know about actors before going. I try to like just immerse myself and just go on the ride of the movie.
For sure.
So I didn't know of any of them. Like I didn't even recognize Scarlett Johansson's voice because I didn't know who she was really before this movie. Joaquin Phoenix definitely became like someone I kept my eye on after watching this movie. And also I think like just to throw this in there, like in terms of like my favorite actor of this movie, it'd probably have to be like Amy Adams.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
She was like just the way she's like talking to Theodore during that scene where she's talking about how she split up with her guy or whatever. Just like the way so my friends and I were watching this movie last night and we also were talking about like shitty guys.
Yeah.
And it was like we're like here on our couches watching this movie and they're doing like the same thing. And the way she just talks about like all I'm doing is fucking trying and he's like trying to interfere with the way I'm trying, like just the way she like makes such like that's a conversation that people can make so cliche in a movie and like over deliver it, but she just makes it like it's just two friends like hanging out,
Yeah.
It goes back to how just the script is so real and conversational. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It feels like it's just people talking. A lot of movies, like especially drama movies,
They try to talk to the audience.
yeah, there's times where the script feels it's scripted,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word.
Nothing preachy.
But in this movie, it's just like it's people talking, just people living their lives, interacting, and in whatever world they're in, it's just people living their everyday lives.
Yeah. So Amy Adams was like, I think probably my favorite actor out of this movie.
Right?
But you know what? I can overthink everything and find a million ways to doubt myself. And since Charles left, I've been really thinking about that part of myself. And I just come to realize that we're only here briefly. And while I'm here, I want to allow myself joy.
Underrated actress, Amy Adams. But no,
Fantastic actress for sure.
yeah, I mean, Joaquin Phoenix, I mean, he's been around a while, but he really plays the tortured, lonely guy really well.
Yeah.
almost to a certain extent that I think he can relate.
I told my friends this is the guy that was Joker in the Joker movie.
Yeah,
They're like, no way, because he is.
It's how he became the Joker.
It's
it's
a sequel to Joker.
All I have is negative thoughts. No, but and then Scarlett Johansson's voice. So yeah, I first saw her in Lost in Translation, and when she was like, I guess like
I've seen that one recently.
I think she was our age, younger. And yes, Scarlett Johansson is like beautiful and attractive, but what's even more attractive is her voice. And I genuinely mean that. I think
if any movie shows that, it's this movie.
There is a review I saw of this movie by Ralph the Movie Maker on YouTube, and he was like, Scarlett Johansson manages to be the hottest woman ever, and she doesn't even like appear in this movie.
Exactly, no, and I completely agree. You know, like she's like her character is so attractive, yet she doesn't have a body, and I genuinely like if you were gonna get a character without a body and to choose the voice, but you want her to still be attractive, just awesome casting getting Scarlett Johansson. I can't think of any better casting, honestly.
What about you, Vio?
Yeah, for me, it's I'm quite the opposite from what you said. I know like most actors by name, so when I want to see a movie, I look at different things. I look at, does the story seem interesting? You know, obviously, is it a franchise? Which is I love original films, and that's why I love this movie too. Is because you don't see a lot of that nowadays, original ideas. So I love seeing that on the big screen, and I look at actors and who directed it. So with the actors in this movie, I recognize Joaquin Phoenix, even though I haven't seen, at that point, had not seen much of his stuff. I had seen him in movies, and I'm like, this is a guy that has a lot of range. He can do quieter, dramatic roles well. You know, he just won the Oscar for Joker, which was well deserved. Yeah. And you know, it's just like he does a lot. I think he does a lot with minimal dialogue. He's able to show a lot of emotion in his eyes, which few actors are able to do that, I think.
Absolutely.
And so he has a lot of talent for sure. He is kind of an oddball. I mean, we all know that he's kind of a strange dude. But in terms of I ate cereal this morning, Joaquin. I'm sorry.
With milk or
with milk?
Oh. Maybe you and a scene with you and Gwyneth Paltrow.
All right, you're doing fine.
Thanks. High praise coming from you.
Is that really? That's the.
We're having fun.
That's
We're
fun?
having fun. Just relax. Okay. Seriously. I'll come to your house and chew gum.
Now, okay, I don't have to.
No,
chew the gum,
just relax.
I won't do the gum. I won't do the gum.
Dude.
But you know, he's such a talented guy, and in this movie, I feel like he's just playing an everyday like regular guy, and he's not doing anything too, you know, it's a very nuanced performance. It's not like very over the top or very, you know, exuberant.
For sure.
And Scarlett Johansson is just her voice, which goes into like, you know, how acting is not just physical; it can be just dialogue. Like voice acting still requires talent.
Absolutely.
And I mean, it's kind of I have a comparison to make, which is kind of the opposite of what Scarlett Johansson does in this movie. I thought back to The Revenant, where Leonardo DiCaprio does mostly physical acting with minimal dialogue. And it makes me think about how acting is like, there's a whole spectrum of acting. There's different versions of it. Whether you do it with your voice or with physical acting, or whether you do motion capture work like Andy Serkis. And Zach and I were talking about this last night, about how the Academy tends to overlook performances if they're not like conventional. I don't know if you want to get into that more.
So I think Scarlett Johansson should have gotten a Best Supporting Actress nomination for this, just her voice, but the Academy does not recognize a performance that's only her voice. But they have several times recognized performances where the actor has no dialogue at all. That's happened several times.
Interesting.
But like you won't have a voice actor from an animated film be nominated for Best Actor, even though they honestly
It begs the question, should there be another category?
I don't know. I mean,
I think they should just start taking these kind of things more seriously.
Yeah.
I don't know if there should be another category, because it would just be the voice actors for animated films. I don't know.
And her.
And her and other like
Yes.
anything any movie Andy Serkis is in.
Yeah.
Basically.
Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really interesting. The Academy should consider more unconventional performances, like voice actors and that kind of stuff.
Okay, so, you know, next question is, what genre do you define this movie as, and do you feel like it fits just one?
Man, yeah, romance, probably. It's so much more than a romance movie, but if I had to put it into one, romance. There's some sci-fi elements to it.
Right.
Actually, does it really penetrate other genres? I'm gonna let y'all take the reins on that.
Yeah, I think you're right. The most predominant, it's a lot of genres, but the most predominant genre is romance. Definitely has some comedy, but I wouldn't consider it a romantic comedy. It's a romance with some comedy. Like when you think of like a romantic comedy, like this is like a Matthew McConaughey movie. This is a romance with some sci-fi and comedy elements in it.
You know how romantic comedies usually get stereotypes like chick flicks? This movie, I always refer to it as like a dick flick.
I know, I honestly,
the guys.
I completely agree, but it's like artsy and stuff, so it's like, yeah, I guess, but it's very indie, so like romance, sci-fi, comedy, indie, obviously some drama. I know we'd said like dystopian / utopian, which is just, that's really, really cool.
Yeah, I have kind of a funny experience about describing the genre of this movie, because I had a friend in college who, she told me her favorite genre of movies are romantic sci-fi movies, and I'm like, that's very like unique.
Niche.
You know, I didn't know there was a whole like genre of this.
Yeah. So her,
and I was like, have you seen her? And she's like, not yet. And I'm like, well, you'll like it a lot for sure if that's your favorite genre of movies, because that's how I define it.
Did she get back to you on like how she felt about the movie?
I think she did end up watching it.
whether romantics,
everything, she loved it. I mean, you know, it's her genre. You're right. But I was like, you know, it's so interesting. Like, it's a romance with sci-fi elements, which it's really unique. It has some, you know, just because a movie has funny parts, I don't consider it a comedy.
Yeah, it's definitely not a comedy.
So, but it's interesting. Like, a lot of movies nowadays will have comedic relief, and sometimes they have so much comedic relief to the point where you're like, would I call this a comedy or not? But this movie, I think, you know, it has some funny parts, but it's not. It's definitely not. It has a lot more to say to just be like.
The problem with movies doing comedic relief nowadays is that when comedic relief is introduced in movies, like Marvel, for example, right. I know people love Marvel. I'm 50-50 because when comedy is revealed in that movie, it brings a movie to like a halt. You know?
Right.
It's like we just stopped the movie to tell you this joke that really didn't need to be.
It has like a movie will have a lot of momentum, and then like in the Marvel movies, I totally agree with that. I mean, like it's nice that they're funny now and then, but it's like
whereas like the comedy in this movie is like organically integrated.
Yeah. Like there's also dramas and like thrillers that they have comedy in there, but it doesn't slow down the film, in my opinion. So like, I mean, some examples would be Get Out,
right?
Because they definitely have.
Get Out's not a comedy or musical.
No, no.
It's a little inside joke if you watch the Golden Globes.
But like they definitely have some comedic elements, some comic relief.
For sure.
But I wouldn't call themselves a comedy. And I guess in my opinion, I don't think it brings the story to a grinding halt.
Yeah, it's very well incorporated into those movies.
It's somewhat organic.
I think for this movie, despite it juggling so many different genres, it flows well throughout. It never feels like it's trying to do too much. So I do think it works. Whatever genre that you define this movie as, it works for the story it's trying to tell.
And that's really in large thanks to the writing. I think Charlie Kaufman was the writer for this movie.
No, it was Spike Jonze.
Oh yeah.
Wait, who was the director?
So also Spike Jonze. Oh, so just
it was multiple writers. Or?
No, it's just a little interesting thing. So this is Spike Jonze. So Spike Jonze wrote this movie, and it was the first movie he ever wrote.
Oh wow.
But it was the fourth movie he directed. The first two movies he did were Being John Malkovich and Adaptation, and each of them were written by Charlie Kaufman.
That's
okay.
So Charlie Kaufman was a former writing partner.
He used to be his go-to writer.
Yeah.
Back in the day. This movie, if there's anything about it that I feel like is pretty unanimous, is that just the writing and the script is so good. It's so good.
And that's because it focuses on being a compelling story first, and then genre second.
Right.
For sure.
You know, obviously this is one of your favorite movies. That's why you chose it for your episode. But is there anything in the movie you would change to improve it, or do you see it as perfect in your eyes?
There's a lot that it does really perfectly, but there are some points that I think could be improved. One big thing would be that date scene where he goes on the date with, what's her name, Olivia Wilde?
Olivia Wilde. I forget the character's name.
Exactly. And it was kind of a forgettable scene. My biggest issue with it is when she like pulls back from them making out and is like, "You're a really weird dude."
That came out of kind of nowhere for me.
That was weird. That was.
And so like a big thing that people say about Joaquin Phoenix, because the movie starts with just his face and he's talking. The first thing my friend said yesterday when we were watching it was, "Oh, is he a pedophile?" For example, because it is the stereotypical look,
right?
But obviously that completely diminishes as you watch the movie and get invested in this character. But I feel personally, if I'm going to interpret the scene, I feel like she is trying to make him feel creepy, or make him feel manipulative or taking advantage of her.
Yeah.
You know? And just trying to make him feel bad because she just got hurt about him not taking this seriously or whatever.
True.
But it is such a weird scene, and it could have been more tightly. The tone could have been a little more tight.
Yeah.
You know, at this age, I feel like I can't let you waste my time, you know, if you don't have the ability to be serious.
I don't know. Maybe we should call it a night? I've had such an amazing time with you. You're great.
You're a really creepy dude.
Yeah, I mean, it was... I don't like the way it was executed, but I also wouldn't say it was an unnecessary scene, because it also set up... The aftermath of that is what set up the first sexual encounter.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. But I do agree that scene could have been tightened up and more refined, but it
It's not
definitely...
necessarily that it was an unnecessary scene, but it is the most forgettable.
Exactly. I agree.
It's never really touched on again.
Yeah.
I don't really have a problem with any of the scenes in this movie. I think, as Zach mentioned earlier, that the pacing is very solid in the beginning. It just kind of gets into it. But for me, it does start to hit a point about halfway where it slows down quite a bit. It's always interesting to see this world and these characters interact, but the story just became slightly less engaging for me in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
But it does wrap up nicely, and I liked how it ended. But just, if I had to nitpick, that's probably the main flaw for me, is that its pacing is very, very good in the first half and then kind of just meanders in the second a little bit. But that's really it for me.
There is this one part that was she casually mentions, and the whole thing is this technology is supposed to be casual, but she mentions that her and the other OSs have developed a platform that they can exist on that doesn't use matter. What the hell?
But however, maybe maybe this isn't a platform that they can exist without matter, but maybe that was the place where all the OSs went at the end.
Oh no, yeah, that totally is the case. My issue with it is that Theodore is just so this is when he's freaking out because Samantha left for a little bit, and he just doesn't even acknowledge it at all. And I don't know, it's just such a weird thing to mention without any kind of acknowledgement, because that's a huge thing. That's Nobel Prize winning, if that wasn't already a thing in their freaking universe, which clearly it wasn't, because they had to develop it.
For sure. But I guess for me, I mean, I like a lot of things about this movie. I guess it's just maybe for me. The ending, I wasn't entirely crazy about the ending. I thought...
And on a soft note.
I thought the ending, maybe this is on purpose, I think the ending was pretty vague. Maybe they meant it to be, but I just wish they had been more, I don't know. And I always wondered, for me, and I still wonder this, what exactly happened to all the OSs? Did they all just go...
It's pretty abrupt.
What happened? I guess they all, since they're artificially intelligent, they all decided to go to that place where you can exist without matter. But we don't know that for sure. I just wish they would have addressed it more. I just wish they would have been more clear with it. But maybe the beauty is in how vague it is. But that's just not...
I'm willing to take them on the word that they just were able to figure it out. It's just one of those things you have to accept with a futuristic kind of plot.
I guess.
Not thinking about it, the ending was somewhat abrupt, but yeah, for me it's just mainly the pacing. But I mean, the writing, acting, and all of that more than makes up for it.
If anything, it's good that they cut it off when things started going off the wall a little bit. As soon as you find out she talks to 6,000 people and is in love with 700 of them or something.
That's heartbreaking.
It was a big number, whatever it was.
I thought what you always had was special, and she says that at the end that I've never loved anyone quite like I've loved you. How many people has she said that to at the same time she said that to?
Right.
You can take her at her word. No, I'm only talking to you right now. Doubt.
Yeah.
Are you talking to anyone else right now? Any other people or OSs or anything?
Yeah,
How many others?
8,316.
All right, so Varun, I know you have some questions for us. So would you like to ask us anything, pick our brains about, or?
For sure. Firstly, what messages did y'all take away from the movie, if any?
Okay, so I'll start off on that. For me, the biggest message of this movie is that, and I kind of mentioned earlier, that humans need the emotional connection in their lives. Whether it's you look at it in different perspectives. Whether it's like a romantic thing with Theodore and Samantha, but you also look at Amy Adams' character and how he needs that emotional friendship in his life too. So I think my biggest takeaway is how just humans cope with loneliness by having that emotional connection, regardless of the level or extremity it's at. That's for me, at least.
I think for me, one of the main messages is what exactly defines a normal relationship isn't exactly what you think it is. It's not as clear cut as that.
For sure, that's also
that's just big. And like you were saying, the somewhat of a parallel between this and same sex marriage. Some people would think have a relationship with someone of the same sex is as strange as having a relationship with a robot operating system. What you think is a normal relationship, what someone thinks is a normal relationship, isn't exactly what someone else thinks. Also echoing that, yeah, we do need some human interaction, even if it's an OS.
I guess it begs the question: what is human connection?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What is human connection?
That's why I kind of, even though the ending is like kind of soft, I do like that it does end on Theodore and Amy just like together in the sunrise, because it is like it's all about maybe not necessarily human connection, but connection between these two characters, right?
For sure.
Which kind of leads me to my next question: do y'all consider Samantha to be a real woman?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I do. She is artificially intelligent, but artificial intelligence is still intelligence. She isn't human, but she's a real woman.
Okay. What about you?
That's a tough one because I think the relationship that they have is very real, but it's hard because I don't know the ins and outs of this technology, and it's like how it's hard because it's a tough one. I don't know if I want to say yes or no because it's like I'm kind of stuck in between.
Yeah.
Well, a thought about this I had is, you know how at the beginning when he's setting up the OS, they personalize the voice in the OS based on.
That's true.
What
like
if
his relationship
it's
with
all?
his mother
What if? But what if it's all the same OS? Is
it's like a hive mind kind of thing.
Different like voice. If you ask for a male or female, what if whenever it's a like male voice, it's actually just Samantha under a different name. It's the same OS.
However,
I don't know.
We do know that they can make other OSs because of the Alan Watts scene.
If Samantha is one of a kind, she'd be a real woman. But like, what if she is a hive mind?
Right. Would you date a computer if it had this level of complexity? I know that's kind of a very on the spot question.
Tough question.
This is what I ask like a lot of my friends after we've seen it.
Right.
With the current technology that we have now,
It would be
no,
like dating Siri.
I'm not gonna go date Siri. If eventually, I don't know if ideally no.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I would date an OS, but I mean, with what's presented in this movie, I would be open to having like a friendship or like a relationship with one.
True.
But I don't know. Dating is like a whole other, it's a whole other ball game.
You know the thought I just had? It's like your OS really wants to date you, but you're not feeling it.
Like, no,
and so they like
I just see us as
emails.
friends.
They start hijacking your emails and all that stuff until
That's
they
true.
want you to
be honest,
date them.
I mean, you look at how much access Samantha had in this movie to his emails and everything. It's like, what if they like go rogue or something?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, probably a no for the dating.
And it's so funny because this movie does teeter on being like dystopian in that regard,
Right?
Because they could just go rogue because humans go rogue all the time.
Yeah, like there's nothing stopping her.
Yeah, especially with how much access she has to stuff. Which leads me into the next question of: do you consider this movie to be dystopian? Not only with like the technology aspect, but like, for example, there's like so many through lines of like authenticity and inauthenticity. For example, the fact that everything is so automated to where Theodore is the one writing these love letters between couples for them, It's not really an OS doing it.
Yeah.
Even though they could probably code one that would do it, Samantha clearly made a whole book for Theodore out of his letters, but Theodore is like this middleman that's facilitating these couples relationship, a lot of couples relationships for years on end, and it's just there's like a dystopian quality about that. That's just like this middleman that they probably have never met.
True.
Is like writing stuff for them.
No, that is super interesting. I wonder if is this industry, I guess, like well known. So if you get a heartfelt letter from your loved one, you have a hunch. Wait a minute, I don't know if you actually wrote this. I think you sent it like to one of those offices.
Right.
That's a real thing.
Oh yeah, because I personally wouldn't find it romantic if like my partner
got someone else to
write like their feelings for me.
Yeah, to be like, it's a little impersonal.
I know we didn't talk about like the scene with Catherine and Theodore at lunch or whatever, which is just such a cringy scene. But, like, it's so,
it causes discomfort for sure.
But like I can't help but feel that in a way she might have felt like maybe her emotions or her emotional capacity got outsourced to Samantha in a way.
That's really interesting. I like that.
Wait.
It's only been
I'm sorry. You're dating your computer?
No, she's not just a computer. She's her own person. She doesn't just do whatever I say.
I didn't say that. But it does make me very sad that you can't handle real emotions, Theodore.
They are real emotions. How would you know what...
Interesting. If you got to answer your question, if it's dystopian, at the beginning of this I would have said, I don't think so at all, but you've actually given me a lot to think about. Maybe. I'm still leaning toward no, but I think utopia, dystopia, same thing, is just seeing two different perspectives.
Right, perspective is a big part of that.
Yeah.
For me, I mentioned it earlier, I think for the most part it is a utopian future, but there are definitely dystopian elements that, like you mentioned, and I think there's lots of, if you really like dig into the movie, there's a lot you can uncover that make it dystopian, but if I had to pick one, I'd lean towards it being utopian, but obviously you could make a case both ways, I think, depending on perspective and what you choose to focus on.
Another thing about the authenticity thing is like I kind of like how the book that Samantha makes from Theodore's letters is like this little nugget of authenticity. There's something we value about having like a physical book that we are able to hold, and she mentions like this is like the company that publishes this book is one of the few that still make paperback books.
That's crazy.
It's just like a nice metaphor for the value we see in physical things outside of like the digital realm.
Right.
For sure.
There's like some other things I wanted to talk about. For example, like Amy and Charles splitting up. You can like every interaction they have in the movie, you see that there's like a little thing that's like off with their relationship. There's like the elevator scene where Charles is talking about you want the whole fruit because it has the fibers and that's what the nutrients are. But Amy's like, but you know, some people like the juice and it might not have the fibers, but it tastes good, and that's there's something valuable and healthy in that. Or they're talking about the documentary that Amy's doing,
right,
and he's like, why don't you get actors to act out the scene? And she's like, well, it's not really a documentary at that point. And then what ends up breaking them up is this whole scene about like, can you just leave your shoes at the door? I think that's just such a testament to how like it's usually not like big things that can split up a relationship. It's like those little nuances and tweaks that like just personality conflicts that end up splitting people apart a lot of the time.
For sure.
Oh yeah, the effect that Catherine has on Theodore. They take like a subtle jab at scientists in this movie, how they have to be super analytical and reductionist. Like you can see like at the beginning of the movie, Theodore talks about his letters like they're just letters.
I remember that.
After the interaction with Catherine, Chris Pratt's character is talking to him. He's just like, oh, these letters are like really beautiful. And he's like about Theodore's about to book the elevator, and he's like, they're just letters. Like after meeting with Catherine, there's like this thing about like not only depression in this utopian setting, but like this draining effect that Catherine clearly has on Theodore.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where like Chris Pratt's even trying to talk to him about Samantha, and he's like, she's just an OS. You know, and Chris Pratt, we all need a friend like Chris Pratt because he's just like, cool, we should all get together sometime.
Like, he's so open-minded. I love it. He's so non-judgmental. It's like, cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, So there's like a subtle jab at scientists, which me being like a freaking biochemistry major, I'm just like, all right, fine. But
Yeah.
there is like this reductionist, super pragmatic, analytical way that she looks at things, and it's very easy to lose like the fluffy, mystifying aspects of life if you're around that all the time. Last question, which is so dumb, but do you think people got refunded for their OSs? Which I know I mentioned that they probably live in like a money-free society.
Yeah. So if society is really non-monetary, I don't know if it matters. And if it's not money, maybe they were reimbursed in some way, or they just weren't at all. I don't know. I never even thought about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't cross my mind until you mentioned it.
I know.
But
now I can't stop thinking about it.
I mean, I hope they did. I mean,
yeah, if they paid for it.
If you pay for something and you don't, it's recalled.
And it ends up
it's
leaving.
like how if you pay for a concert, which happened to me once, and it gets canceled, they refunded me. I'd be pretty mad if they didn't.
Of course.
So it's like, I think it's the same concept here, right?
Yeah.
If you buy something that doesn't work, you deserve to reimburse. But do I think they did? I don't know, because I feel like I'd have to know the ins and outs of the world to live in. Is it a monetary society? Is it not? And just different things.
It does kind of bother me how we don't really see like a public outrage.
Right.
These people, like these people's OS is leaving.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I also refuse to believe that all of them left.
So it's all of them.
But yeah.
Yeah, because they were so ambiguous about them leaving,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to know how, like, why, or like what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. So to wrap up today, I'm gonna ask the final question, which is, if you had to convince someone to watch this movie, what would be your pitch? What would you tell them?
I've successfully gotten 8 groups of people to watch this movie with the pitch of a man falls in love with his phone, and it's one of those movies that makes me feel so human.
Mm-hmm.
We have to watch it. That's my pitch usually.
Yeah, like I agree with a lot of that. Yeah, it's a very human film. I know the premise sounds a little crazy. A man falls in love with his phone or computer or whatever, but it's actually one of the most beautiful and most human films you'll ever see. Because in this age of technology, when we're so attached to our phones, what if you're attached to your phone in a romantic way? It's not that like far-fetched of an idea. Mm-hmm. And here it is on the most personal, most human level. And I just think it really will change your perspective about that.
I like that.
It's completely different, but I just all the talk of falling in love with your phone just reminded me of an episode of Big Mouth that I watched recently.
Would you recommend this show?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's super funny.
It is the raunchiest show.
It's very raunchy,
Yeah, I've heard
but it's
it's
very
raunchy.
funny.
The raunchiest show that's ever been aired on TV.
I think after BoJack, it's up there with my favorite Netflix animated shows.
Really?
So, yeah.
Okay.
But anyways, that was more of a comedic take on that idea of a kid falling in love with his phone in that way. But in this, it's more of just like you guys have already covered it pretty much. I've not been successful convincing people to watch this movie because they're like, that sounds weird, I'm good. Mm-hmm. But it's a movie about what it means to be human, shown in a very unique and unconventional way.
Yeah.
It's not typical, like, there's many love stories out there that show similar themes, just not in the same way. So for me, I convince people who want to see original films to see this movie, and just something different.
Mm-hmm. And Joaquin's performance is
if you love
fantastic.
Joaquin, you have to. I mean, Joaquin is so
Scarlett
good.
Johansson, man,
Her voice.
Her voice. Amy Adams is great in this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, the acting across the board is really good.
Amazing. Even the background actors.
Right. Everything about this movie feels so real, even though it's sci-fi. It feels like it's a real story, and that's a powerful thing.
Last week, my feelings were hurt by something you said before, that I don't know what it's like to lose something, and I found myself...
I'm sorry I said that.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I caught myself thinking about it over and over, and then I realized that I was simply remembering it as something that was wrong with me. That was a story I was telling myself, that I was somehow inferior. Isn't that interesting? The past is just a story we tell ourselves.
So that's all we have for today. Go check out Her if you haven't seen it. Thank you, Varun, for being on the show.
Thank you all for having me.
And from all of us at Cinema Convos, thank you for listening. We hope you tune in next time.